Hello everybody and welcome. For today's video I thought it would be fun to look back at a clash between two of the great players of yesteryear. In this particular encounter we have Chigorin with the white pieces and Emanuel Lasker with black, the former world champion. Chigorin was a very aggressive, tactical player, and in this game we see him slowly be outfoxed and outplayed by the calm and patient maneuvering of Lasker with the black pieces. So I think it's quite instructive and it's an interesting clash of styles. So Chigorin kicks off with e4, Lasker responds with e5, then we see knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4. Bishop c4, this signals the start of the Italian game, and if black continues here with knight f6, this is the three knights variation, or if he responds with bishop c5, that's more like a traditional Italian game. This is a really good opening, especially if you're just starting out in chess. It's very simple and direct. I mean, there's still a fair amount of theory, but I think white's play is quite easy to understand, and it has the advantage that it's very quickly developing the kingside pieces, vacating these the f and g squares so that white can castle early. And I would recommend to any beginners that you should try a castle as early as possible so that you're not going to get caught with your king in the center. So anyway, Lasker responded by playing bishop to c5, which is all standard theory. And now we see what appears to be a strange move if you've never encountered before, and that's b4. And this was a very popular opening in its day, and it's still played even at Grandmaster level today. But it was a favorite of attacking players like Paul Morphy and Mikhail Chigorin. So the idea of this opening is basically that white is prepared to give up this b pawn in order to gain a very strong pawn center and use that as the basis for launching an attack against the black king. So what we normally see is that the bishop would take the pawn on b4, and then white would follow up with the move c3, gaining a tempo on the bishop, and then immediately following up with d4, challenging the center. Then if the e pawn captures on d4, then the c pawn can take, and we end up with a nice solid pawn center, which is well worth the pawn deficit. But white's advantage after this opening is sort of transitory in nature. That means to say that if he's not able to take advantage and get a successful attack out of it, eventually black will be able to equalize the position and could go on to win the game. So it's a very interesting opening, and it's a fun one to try out if you've never played it before. There's definitely some very sharp encounters. So anyway, let's go back to the game. So Lasker continued with bishop takes b4. If you don't take the pawn, you're really just losing some space and time by moving the bishop again. So it's correct to take the pawn. So now Chigorin plays c3, and black played now bishop c5. This move isn't seen so much today. Opening theory has evolved quite a lot since these days. This game was played over 100 years ago, and modern theory says that bishop a5 or bishop d6 are better responses, because after white plays d4 and then the pawns exchange in the center, black would be forced to move his bishop again, losing some time. So anyway, Chigorin opts not to play d4 immediately, but instead castles. So he's just trying to get his rook into the game and his king into safety. Lasker played d6 now, just defending the pawn on e5, and preparing to develop his light squared bishop. And now we see d4. So this is sort of the main point of this opening, the Evans Gambit, is that now white has kind of taken control of the center. So black just retreats his bishop to b6, opting to keep the tension in the center. Often you would just see e takes d and c takes d here. And now we see a4, and this move is sort of characteristic of Chigorin's style, and there's a certain amount of, it's very sort of aggressive and almost seems impatient at times, whereas Lasker's play is more measured and precise. So we get this clash of styles. Lasker just calmly develops another piece to f6 and puts some pressure on the e4 square, and now we see a slightly strange move, and that Chigorin just plays bishop b5, pinning the knight on c6. Lasker calmly plays a6, basically saying, okay, what are you going to do? Making white commit to a decision with the bishop, and he's also vacating this a7 square so that he can retreat his bishop later if white plays a5. So Chigorin just decides to take the knight now on c6, and Lasker plays b takes c6. So it's fairly even at this point. Black is probably doing a little bit better because, in my opinion, this a4 move is really not doing much. He plays a5 now again, and Lasker is able to utilize this escape square that he's created for himself with a6 by going to a7. And now we see a little bit of liquidation in the center. So Chigorin plays d takes e, and now black just snaps up that pawn on the e4 square, and you'll see that over the next few moves he's able to get some nice harmony among his pieces and support that nice outpost on e4. So already black is developing a slight advantage, and at this point white plays a fairly inaccurate move. He plays here queen e2. There was a better move in the position, and that was to play queen to a4, which would be hitting the pawn and the knight, and it seems to be a little bit more accurate and telling. However, he didn't do that. He played this queen e2 move, and now black is able to just play d5. So he's just supporting that beautiful knight outpost on e4. White improves a piece, just bringing his knight into a more central position. However, there's a tactic here, and I wonder if you could just pause the video for a second and see if you can find it. Lasker unleashes a small tactic that wins a pawn. Okay, so black plays here knight takes c3, and after knight takes c3 we have bishop takes d4, and now the bishop is in an excellent square in the center of the board. It's hitting this undefended knight on c3 and also challenging white's advanced pawn on the e5 square.